started from the bottom. Not a lot of surprise here. I have the New York Football Giants, and I think it's going to be another rough season. I have them going 5-12. I love their defensive line with Brian Williams, Sexy Dexter Lawrence, and Kayvon Thibodeau. After that, I don't know what else really is there to smile about. I mean, like Malik Neighbors, I think he's going to be very good, but I did see that they unretired the number 1 so he could wear it, which I think is kind of cool. That like the family from the Giants player that it was retired for basically gave blessing to unretire, so Malik Neighbors could wear number 1. So that's kind of cool. Other than that, though, I mean, Daniel Jones is responsible for throwing in the ball. Drew Lock is responsible for throwing the ball. I don't really love those options. I think in fantasy, it's a little shaky. He's a best ball baller is how I classified him. We did our breakdown is he's going to have some weeks where he's awesome, but then other weeks where they're just going to double team him. And there's just not a lot to love with the team right now. They're clearly in a reload and a rebuild. And there's just not a lot to love. So I won't spend too much time on the Giants. I'm worried that's another one where you get tickets to watch the other team play at this point. And they play on that dangerous field of MetLife Stadium where people get injured all the time. So like I don't even trust that. We're going to move on from the Giants. I'm already tired about talking. I think it's going to be a rough season for them. But moving on to speaking of stadiums that are basically death traps, I have the Washington Commanders at next in the division at 6-11. This is it. They have a very strong chance to do that worst to first flip that we see all the time. Young, dynamic quarterback, scary like it's Terry McLaurin, new coach in Dan Quinn. So a really good draft, but I still don't see it. I'm still worried about that defense. Dan Quinn's a very good defensive mind, but he doesn't have a Micah Parsons that he could completely or a Trayvon Diggs or guys like that he could change the game with defensively. Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen are awesome, but they're not running a 4-3 off the edge. They're going to eat the middle, and then someone's going to walk around the edge, basically. They don't have the – if you let me have Montez Sweat back on this team, we'll see. I think there's some building on that defense and offensive line. Jaden Daniels is – we'll talk more in awards next week, but I think he's very much in that contention for Rookie of the Year. I think he's like second in odds or something like that, rightfully so. But I don't love the Commanders this year for winning a lot of games. I love them to be fun, though. They will be exciting. They will be dynamic. They will lose games like 32-28. I think there will be a lot of fun games. Jaden Daniels will give Commanders fans heart attacks with the almost cartoonish way he gets hit sticks sometimes. He usually gets up, but watching him get hit, it almost feels like you're watching Looney Tunes, the way his body flails and bends sometimes. But that's going to take us now to number 2 in the division. That is Kelcey's Dallas Cowboys. I'm sitting at 10-7. Losing Dan Quinn, I think, will hurt a little bit. The CeeDee Lamb contract dispute, I think, will hurt a little bit. Dak is still Dak. Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott, Deuce Vaughn, I don't know what they're going to do at running back. We'll see. They didn't really get better, so I think they're going to take a step back this year. In the division, I think they got the least better of everybody, but they were the best last year. So I think they always win 12 games usually. That's been kind of their MO the last few years. I think that takes a step back to 10-7, but it's still the Cowboys. They'll still find a way to get it done. Deron Bland's going to miss, I think, 8 weeks, it looks like right now with an injury, but you get Trayvon Diggs coming back. So we will once again have to wait to see those two on the field at the same time to see how that plays out. Still have a lot of good defensive personnel, still got CeeDee Lamb. You still got pretty good offensive line, Brandon Cooks. They'll be fine overall. I just don't think they'll be they won't terrify people like they were doing at certain stretches last year. I still have them going 4-2 in the division because Dak owns the NFC East in those matchups, basically. That will take us now to number 1. I do have the Philadelphia Eagles bouncing back and taking the division with a 12-5 record. I don't care about the Saquon Barkley edition. Saquon's awesome, but I don't care about that as much. I think he's going to be fun, but he's not the reason we're here. Losing Jason Kelcey is absolutely awful. That almost any other offensive line losing Jason Kelcey, I think, cripples you to 3rd in the division. This is like one of the 2 or 3 offensive lines where you can they had enough depth with like Landon Dickerson and those other guys that they could make it work. My biggest thing that I love about them is the coordinator switches. Bringing in Vic Fangio defensively, I think, is an upgrade, especially over what they were doing last year. Like, that was just rough. If nothing else, I think they'll get some takeaways again. And then offensively, I love Kelsey's boy Kellen Moore as the offensive coordinator. Their biggest issue last year, I think, was especially against blitzes, like cover 0 type blitzes. They had absolutely no answer because their entire offense was quarterback draw, tush push, bombs up the sideline inside zone. They had almost no or the occasional little RPO to Dallas Goedert before he got hurt. Their offense was incredibly vanilla. It was we joke about it. It was like taking a very Spark Notes dumbed down version of Shane Steichen's offense from 2022 and trying to run it. Like if you're playing Madden and you give the controller to like a nephew and say, hey, just press X. And they just run halfback dive and spam X the whole time, basically, or A button if you're on Xbox. I think that's what we saw last year. I think Kellen Moore, they're going to have answers for blitzes. They're going to have HOTS, alerts. What we saw with Amari Cooper, we saw with CeeDee Lamb. We saw it last year, too, with Keenan Allen and Mike Williams when they were healthy with Justin Herbert for all of 8 minutes. Problem was everybody broke it periodically, so we didn't get to see it as much of the Jets. Or, sorry, the Chargers, excuse me, not the Jets. Although the Jets, everyone broke, too. But I think we're going to see a lot of those questions answered. Secondary-wise, they're better. I'm not going to say Quinyon Mitchell, Cooper DeJean, and all those guys are going to transform them into the top 1 defense. They're just going to be less bad defensively. They're going to get some takeaways. They're not going to get toasted. But my biggest takeaway is offensively, I think they're going to be dynamic again. And Jalen Hurts is going to have – there's going to be answers for Jalen Hurts, not just, hey, save us, guy. And I think he'll be healthier this year. It's not just A.J. Brown's down there with Chipotle somewhere. He'll make a play. Or, hey, Devon, it's not just relying on their talent to win. They actually will run an offense this year. So I'm going to have the Eagles taking the division at 12-5. And right now I think it's going to be it's still going to be the Cowboys and the Eagles battling at the top, though. I am sorry to the Commanders and the Giants. I think the Commanders will be competitive, but I'm going to give the Eagles bouncing back and take this one in a close race down to the end, nonetheless.
Yeah, I don't hate this. People might be like, "Oh, you're a Cowboys fan. How dare you say you don't hate the fact that Eagles are 12-5?" No, I really don't hate that. In all reality, it's just the Eagles for me. I'll have my own reasons why they're not first in the division, but I do think they're a team that is capable of 12-5 in their best days. But I've learned to not pick on the best days, if that makes sense. Pick for a potentially worst case scenario seems to be the most likely. And when I say worst case, I don't mean like somebody goes down with a catastrophic injury. I mean just like, okay, what games should you win but you lose type of picking. So I'll get to that in a minute. And then, anyways. But I do think an underrated part of the Eagles, you mentioned they sucked versus cover zero. Part of that, and people aren't ready to have this conversation about Jalen Hurts, but Jalen Hurts, while mobile, is an unwilling runner of the ball in the passing game.
He's not moving to run, basically. Like he's not throwing on the run a whole lot. Once he moves, he's taking it.
And he has been an unwilling runner of the ball when it's a pass play. And that's just the way he is. Ever since that injury in his rookie year, or was it sophomore year, whatever, second year in the league. And ever since that moment, he came back and it was just like, there's a little something different about Jalen. And the fact is, he is a passer. He is very Donovan McNabb-esque in his ability to pass the ball. He does not choose to actively run. Now, if the play call is a run, like the tush push, he will do that. What did they go and do to help him? That's go add Jahan Dotson as an actual legitimate number 3 who has experience getting into the end zone, not just carrying the ball down the field 40 yards and then going out of bounds. But yeah, I like this team. I like the top 2 receivers. Obviously, they're talented. It'd be stupid to say otherwise. But the Eagles are the Eagles. And if there's one fault on this team, it may not lie on the offensive side of the ball, but it may be that defensive side of the ball, and especially that secondary. There's questions. So while you go 12-5 with them, I'm thinking something different in my head when I'm talking about this team. So yeah, we'll get to that in a minute. But yeah, I don't hate any of your other picks. I understand them all. They all make sense. Surprisingly, you were meaner to the Giants than I was. So go figure.
I wanted to make the Giants higher. When I look back, it's like, damn, really? But like, then when you look back to the schedule, it's like, there's just a lot of, if they're going to have a better record, it's going to be like 2022 where they're going to escape randomly with a lot of those weird close games, like when they went on that playoff run. And I don't know if Lightning's going to strike twice like that in 3 years. They're built differently, but not in a great way. It feels like they're not good built differently. They're built differently, not built different.
They're built different, but not good different, but bad different.
They're built different like Boeing at this point, it feels like, outside the defensive line. They're doing the right things. Like Malik Neighbors is a good pick. They did some bringing in Brian Burns. The problem is you got work to do. You overachieved too quickly in 2022. But I will say with the Eagles thing, just wrapping up before I recap everything, if they don't make the playoffs, I think he gets fired. Or if they're like a 7 seed and they get crushed in round 1, like disappointment, anything, I feel like they got to at least be like a 5 seed. Like at minimum, let's say the Cowboys, it's like last year where they're 12-5, and then the Cowboys are 13-4, something like that, or Cowboys are 12-5, you're 11. You got to be at least a 5 seed. Anything less than that, and with how much they've invested in the team and how much Roseman's won the offseason for the third year in a row, he has to at least get the 5 seed at minimum. So
I'd say
otherwise,
I'm gonna say just playoffs, but I get what you're saying.
I'll say if they do make the playoffs and at the 7th seed and then get cooked right away, he's gone. But if he makes it
Yeah,
the 7th seed, wins, then okay, maybe I'll rephrase that. Has to win a playoff game then, or if
Yeah,
you lose, it's by like the skin of your teeth, like Jared Goff throws a late touchdown pass or something
or
like
you
that.
lose on some fluke of a pass interference that doesn't get called again, type of thing. All the Saints type of
Field goal or something like if you
yeah.
get smoked, like if it's last year reincarnated, Nick Sirianni is gone. And if at any point they're below 500 after week 6, he's gone in the season. I think that leash is very, very short. So I hate to say that because I don't hate Nick Sirianni as much as other guys do, but I think his way of doing things and his demeanor runs thin when the results aren't there. Unfortunately, it's similar to Bill, just without 15 years behind it, if that makes sense, with New England, where he had a 20-year resume of like, all right, it works until it doesn't. And I think
you need to clarify which Bill you're talking about because it's not necessarily Belichick.
Well, I'm saying in Bill Belichick, he wore people thin, but when you actually have the success, people are willing to deal with it. Nick
I
Sirianni,
was thinking he's more Bill Parcells than he is Belichick in his just attitude and demeanor, and just again same concept. Like, he doesn't have the background to back it up, but same problems as Parcells, especially.
Same ideas. Like in your demeanor and kind of way you go about things. When it works, it's great. Everyone overlooks it, but when you underachieve, that's when they start to point fingers. Especially when your expectation is so high because Howie Roseman is the ultimate Madden GM in the offseason, for better and for worse. So we'll see. I do like them, but we'll go and quickly recap what I'm looking at for the NFC East. I'll start from the bottom to the top. Starting at the bottom, we have the Giants at 5-12, the Commanders at 6-11, but electric, the Cowboys at 10-7, and the Eagles retaking the NFC East at 12-5. So, Kelcey, you alluded to it. We have some differences of opinion, but the floor is not yours, sir. This is your favorite division to talk about, and for better and for worse.
Yeah. So we'll just get straight into it and then kind of rip off the Band-Aid here. New York Giants, 4th in the division. Again, I was nicer than DJ though, 7-10.
You had them respectable. I'm surprised. You had more than I did today already.
So I think Brian Dabble with Daniel Jones is going to give him a little bit more of a boost. I think standard Daniel Jones' team has 5 wins, but I think Brian Dabble's influence on Daniel Jones, and I think the Malik Neighbors effect are going to get them a little bit more and get them to that 7-win mark. I have them beating the Cowboys in Dallas, and I have them beating the Eagles in Philadelphia. Those are the only 2 division wins they have, but those are the 2 they get because for some reason Dallas and New York always split the series every year. It doesn't make sense. And Philadelphia lately with the Giants has always had an issue of trying to kind of put them away. They can get up on them, but they will never put the Giants away, it feels like. So I think that comes back to bite them at some point in time. And those are really the 2 difference in the win total here between me and you, if I'm being honest. I think everything else we probably pick the same, but those are probably the 2 that I'm like, yeah, these make sense. Just because of the way the East goes.
That makes sense. So, I had the 1-5 in the division for context. So yeah, that might be just the differences we have. But
yeah, so but this team does have holes. I just think where they tried to fill, I think it's a good spot to start to fill the holes. Like, you start with offensive line, you start with defensive line, and you try to get a weapon out there for your quarterback that if you put that much money into, you need to have the ability to say, yes, that is an actual weapon, and not, no offense to Darius Slayton, love him, but that's Darius Slayton out there. Like, that's not the same as saying that's Malik Neighbors. And again, no slight to Darius Slayton. Love the guy to death. Would love you in Dallas. Anyways, it's just one of those things with the Giants that there are concerns. You go from Saquon to Devin Singletary. That's a downgrade. No offense to Singletary again. But then on defense, you lose Xavier McKinney. Who are you replacing with? A rookie? Okay. How's that going to work out for you? Now, don't get me wrong. I didn't have the highest opinion of Xavier McKinney, but not the same 2 players. One has NFL experience, and one was a starting defensive back in the NFL, and one is a rookie. So there are questions about the Giants, but I do think they'll surprise a couple teams, particularly the Cowboys. And by the way, I do need to point out you are wearing a Phillies stuff, and we are wearing supposedly wearing things for teams every time we get a chance. Yeah, I'm wearing black because of just how sad I am about the potential futures of the NFC East succeeding beyond my wildest dream. That's not going to happen. But anyways, moving on. We're going to move on from the Giants because I don't need to beat up them too much. I got to dig in early. I don't need to get a second dig. This one's probably going to catch me some flack, and I don't care about it. The Eagles. But just really importantly, check the record. 10-7 for the Eagles, third in the division. It's wild to think, right? That they do well, but at the same time cannot get past second and third in the division. They end up third in this division, and people are going to wonder why. And I think Nick Sirianni is an okay coach. I don't think Nick Sirianni is a really good coach. I think Nick Sirianni has too much of an ego to be a quality head coach. I think he has the makings of a quality head coach, but he has too big of an ego that prevents him from succeeding. The whole drama last year with Jalen Hurts, there's always going to be a little bit of that in the back of the minds of every single player that was there last year. That's going to be important. The moment they start losing, you mentioned it, they go under 500 after week 6. There's no promises for Sirianni to still be there. But there will be promises for Jalen Hurts to still be there. I do think there are a lot of good pieces on this team, but I think those two, and then I rank the loss of Jason Kelcey as a huge loss. You mentioned it cripples teams down to third in the division. I agree, which is exactly why I have the Eagles at third in the division, is because while they did have valid potential replacements, it's still a replacement and a downgrade from a world tier center. This guy was dominating in his last season in the league, and no offense to whoever's stepping into the foot of him, into his feet, they're not going to be the same. Jalen Hurts is going to have a learning curve with him. It is part of the process between quarterbacks and centers. You just have to deal with this, and that's an unfortunate part of how good the Eagles can be. Is right now they are going to be very, very hampered by a center quarterback combination where there's a lot of communication that's going to have to happen pre-snap. That with Kelcey and Hurts, that was like second nature. They had built that relationship. Now you put in a replacement, that relationship isn't necessarily the same. And especially if he's a center that prefers the guard to tap him to snap, that's not something Jason Kelcey did. Jason Kelcey was able to do it all by himself. So that's part of this. And then again, I'm bringing up the secondary because the secondary here, what did you do? You brought back the guy who cost you a Super Bowl? That's your plan? You're going to put him at safety? That's going to help you. You brought back Chauncey Gardner-Johnson? That's going to help you? No. If we're being honest about this team, that's not an improvement over what you did last year. I'm concerned Cooper DeJean is just the hype guy for the summer, for White Boy Summer. I am concerned. I can't lie. Let's not forget that the guy is from Iowa, and Iowa's defense wasn't that great last year. Now, he's good. His talent is off the charts. But, yeah, I mean, does it transition? We'll see. I have concerns, which is why I have him at 10-7. Obviously, I think I rank the loss of your center huge. A huge piece of this. I do like the moves you made in the offseason. But, again, I'm a lineman at heart, so I'm always going to look at the big line losses here. And I think Jason Kelcey, maybe it's me being respectful to an Eagle for once, but I think Jason Kelcey might be one of the best centers to ever play. If not top 3, and he's not number 3, and he's probably not number 2, or if he's number 2, it's very close. And that's high praise, if you ask me. So yeah, I think they're really good. I think there's going to be some issues with the coaching staff and that loss with Kelcey, and those are going to be the deciding factors here. And I do think that secondary is going to lose them some games that they should win. I think the Giants sneaking in and beating the Eagles. I think Malik Neighbors is a reason they beat the Eagles. I think Malik Neighbors has the game-breaking ability to shred a secondary that's not necessarily on the same page. And they don't exactly send Darius Slay across the field to follow somebody. So that's a big part of it.
I will agree. One thing I will say about the secondary, the best thing the Eagles could do is get Quinyon Mitchell and Cooper DeJean out there as fast as they can. Don't roll with Darius Slade and James Bradbury and be like, it's been working. We're going to go get the young kids out there to let them take the lumps early so you have them down the back half of the season. I think if you
Yeah.
try and wait and you try and ride the James Bradbury train because that second team All Pro a few years ago because of the 70 sacks, you're going to get in trouble. Darius Slay is still the godfather, but you need him in sparing roles. I think you got to get the young guys out there as soon as you can. So that's my one chime in, is get the young guys on the field. That's your best chance. You lose a game early is better than losing 2 or 3 late.
Absolutely agree.
Which is
100%
what I
agree.
think they will do. I think by week 4, we will see, if not out of the gate, I think Quinyon Mitchell will be starting real quickly.
He should.
first
I think the concern is the same thing you hit on with Sirianni, and we'll talk about this in just a minute. But I think concern being him losing some games early on, too many games early on, for trying something like that. So, yeah, we'll get to that in a second. But just moving on, we'll finish my list first, and then we'll talk about it. The number 2 team in the division, the Commanders, tied at 10-7 with the Eagles. This comes down to in-division record. I think the in-division difference here is Jaden Daniels. I think their additions in Austin Eckler, who, by the way, in his time in the Chargers, has dominated the NFC East teams. He is an absolute NFC East torture device. I hated seeing him. I think every other player, every other fan of a team in the NFC East hates seeing him still in division. Obviously, there's a huge question of why they got rid of Jahan Dotson. I don't understand that. I'll never understand that. But I do think that Jaden Daniels has an absolute weapon in Scary Terry. And I think Jaden Daniels is a guy that in himself is going to have to be accounted for. You're not going to be able to guard 10 on 11. You're going to be guarding 11v11 every single time. And you probably need to focus 2 guys on Daniels just to be safe, because he does have the ability and he is a willing runner. And I think that's a big piece of why I have the Commanders here at 10-7. I'm going 4-2 in division. So when I say this team is going to surprise some folks, I do think they're going to surprise some folks here and do something different. And I think that's what this offense is about. I think that's what getting Jaden Daniels is doing for somebody. It's going to do something different until they get tape on them, which is always a big part of this conversation. It takes a season to really get legitimate tape on somebody. And we saw it with, that's why we always see a second year regression from really, really good rookies. But you don't have that yet with Daniels. You don't know what he's going to do. And you gave him weapons to work. Obviously, getting rid of Dotson is a different conversation. But as of right now, you gave them weapons. And we'll see what he can do with that. But I do think he's going to be better than none at 10-7. I also think they're going to figure out whatever's going on with their secondary and whatever happening in preseason. Emmanuel Forbes, I don't even know what happened there. But he has talent. I don't know if what happened to get him on the bench. It's not good from him. But yeah, I think this team's going to be good enough to surprise some folks. And I think their schedule is one of those schedules where you're like, oh well, this is the team that picked in the top 5. They get a top 5 draft pick schedule. So yeah, that's always helpful in these conversations. And then we're gonna get on to the top of the division, and I don't like this. I don't like it. I wish I could take it back. But like I said, I picked it blindly, and I'm going with it. It's the Cowboys 11-6. Obviously, Deron Bland getting hurt changed my mind real quick and in a hurry about this 11-6 idea, because I did think that the big reason they were going to go 11-6 is they had 2 really good corners, and they got Trayvon Diggs back. And as much as I've hated on Trayvon Diggs in his entire career, I will say that as far as corners go in the league, he is one of the best corners when he's healthy. Deron Bland proved he is one of the best corners in the league last year when he led the league in interceptions. That is 2 corners that at some point in time in their career have led the league in interceptions on the same team when healthy. Problem is they're not both healthy. Second problem is there's questions across the rest of this defense, and it's just where it is. The offensive line, up the gut in the offensive line. Are you going to be solid enough? The running backs, are you going to be solid enough? Can you rely on just Dak Prescott, Jake Ferguson, and CeeDee Lamb? Brandon Cooks occasionally? I don't know. That's why I hate this. The fact this happened. I wanted to say in the rip that I did not actively choose this thing to happen, but given their schedule and given their ability to win in different ways, I think that's why they're going to go 11-6. And I do think Micah Parsons is a absolute havoc maker. He will, whatever your game plan is, throw it out of the books, throw it out of in the river as soon as he breaks through the line, because there's no defending a guy that gets to you within 1.5 seconds. it's insane. Double team him, do what you got to do to fix it. But his ability to get to the quarterback needs to be brought back. Dan Quinn did a great job with that when he was coaching Parsons, of just sending him after the quarterback, not giving him too much to think about, and just saying, go wreak havoc. And he did. And I think that's going to be a big loss for him. But I think he's already learned in 2.5 years that, yeah, okay, I can play this at this level. I think Dexter Lawrence is going to figure himself out this year. I think this is going to be a year we have a decent Dexter Lawrence, not great, just decent. So that's why I got the Cowboys here, 11-6, taking the top division. But I will say, just like you said about Sirianni, if this team is the opposite end of the spectrum, where they are struggling, Mike McCarthy is gone. And yes, that's probably the likely case. So, DJ, what do you think?
Well, there is a receiver that knows the Dallas area pretty well by the name of Noah Brown who's out there if they need some help. I mean, you could bring him back. There was a point in the last year when he's top 3 in receiving. So if they need a guy, he's out there somewhere. But Commanders, I wanted to do the same with them so bad. Like every game I looked at, I was like, oh, I'm so close. Like they could be like RG3's Commanders that just came out of nowhere. I'm still just worried about it. And if you tell me Jane Daniels is going to stay very healthy, I can see this very, very likely. The literal cartoonish way he gets hit sticked always worries me. Like when even going back to like that Florida State game at the beginning of last year when he tried to hurdle through the middle of the line and just gets helicoptered. I don't need him doing that with Micah Parsons or with Jordan Davis and his name eludes, Jalen Carter against the Eagles. I don't need you doing that up the middle of that defense. That will be a car crash in the middle of the field if they do that. I don't need that going on. So I like a lot there. I'm a little bit worried, but I can very easily see this. I can see them winning the division. They burned me last year when I tried to believe in them, so I'm not going to do it again this year. But they could be right in the middle of it. The Cowboys are always in the thick of it. As much as we rip on them in the playoffs, the regular season, you can almost.
They're regular season superstars. I think they have a star on their side of the helmet. It's not for championships. It is definitely for regular season positive.
Exactly. We already touched on the Eagles. There is a path, and they just have to take the path and not let it get distracted. With the Giants, we kind of talked about it. It could be good-ish, but their good-ish is like 7-10. They're unfortunately in a division full of teams that are better than them. That's the only way I know how to really put it at this point. Maybe they surprise like they did last year where they were the worst team in the division but finished with the second worst record. Maybe they pull something like that off again, but good luck. That's all I got from them at this point.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. It's just we'll have to wait and see. This is the thing with the NFC East. You just never know. I hate it because it's so random. Picking with your heart doesn't work. Picking with your brain doesn't work. So just pick somewhere in between, which is why I'm hoping that blindly picking this gets me somewhere in close.
Picking with your car.
Yeah, picking with my dog at this point in time where she only goes to one bowl. But yeah, no, we'll see what happens there. But just to recap here for my NFC East predictions, starting at the bottom, I have the New York Giants at 7-10. Not that bad. Philadelphia Eagles coming in at 3rd in the division. Still not that bad, though, when they go 10-7. Washington Commanders, 2nd in the division, tied with the Eagles at a 10-7 record. And the Dallas Cowboys, top of the division, much to my maligned opinion, at 11-6.
Best way to put it. And for the last anonymous fan vote for the divisions of the year, take a look from the bottom to the top. The Giants at 3-14. The Commanders at 5-12, the Cowboys at 8-9, and the Eagles at 10-7. So, on literally all accounts, that was more brutal than all three of them than we were. So, you know what? We were the good teachers today. We did not break out the red pen to the same extent.
I'm not used to being the good guy in these situations. What just happened? Did we just get replaced on our own show for the bad guy? Like, does this fan vote just take over the bad guy in this opinion in this moment?
I suppose so. I guess like there is no longer I guess it's not the good guy and the bad guy. It's the two relatively low.
It's no longer highs and lows in the high-low podcast. It's just highs because that guy is those folks are just picking the lows there. The fan vote.
That was absolutely brutal. And for next year, if someone is interested in being that anonymous fan vote, feel free to reach out to us and we will pick somebody from that group as well too. See if they want to chime in next year and see if their predictions get on the board. So we'll definitely keep an eye out for that.